Okay, what's the best long run that you can do to prepare for your marathon pace? In this video, I'm going to give you my favorite marathon session, the session that tells me exactly where I am in relation to my goal marathon pace. I'm going to show you how to progress onto that session and the progressions from there to go even further. I'm Lee Grantham, a coach and a professional ultra runner who went from running a marathon in 4 hours and 25 minutes to running a marathon in 2 hours and 21 and representing my country at both the marathon and the ultra marathon. If you're at a point with your training when you know you're capable of running way faster times, but you just don't know how to get there and want the guidance from a professional, then get in contact by booking a call in the description. This is from Wayne. I love the idea of long run too. Is there any progression to this, i.e. doing 6 mile progressions or going faster than goal marathon pace? So Wayne asked about those progressions off the back of a progression run, 8 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 8 kilometers, getting progressively quicker towards marathon pace. So we'd start at marathon pace plus 20%, the middle 8 kilometers at marathon pace plus 10%, and then finishing with marathon pace. The progression that I gave in that video was to finish faster than marathon pace. So the middle section is at marathon pace. You're starting at marathon pace plus 10%, and you're finishing with either half marathon pace or marathon pace plus 5 to 10%. So there's a simple progression that we can progress on with pace. So let me give you exactly how I would start and the progressions on over the weeks and what I would do in order to get to a point where I could run 30 kilometers with a big chunk of that at marathon pace and all being relative to marathon pace, which is really important for your race. So rather than just show you the progressions to that run, let me show you what every run would look like so that you have 6 or 12 progressions from that same run. So starting very, very easy, very light, but we're always thinking marathon pace. And we want to be moving over the ground at marathon pace and relative to marathon pace. So all I care about is my marathon pace, 3:20 per kilometer or 5:20 per mile, 10% slower than marathon pace, 3:40 per kilometer, and 20% slower than marathon pace, 4 minutes per kilometer. And so remember, we want to go gradual with all our running, but this progression run is specific, and it's specific to the pace that you want to move over the ground on race day. So I'd start with a 15-kilometer progression run. That would very simply be split up into 3 5-kilometer sections. Finishing with marathon pace, middle section, marathon pace plus 10%, so 3:40 per kilometer for me. And the first section, marathon pace plus 20%, 4 minutes per kilometer. And that initial section at 4 minutes per kilometer, it's not a shock to the system, it's not a shock to the heart or the body, because I'm warming up to a point where I'm ready to hit that and it's all in my control. And that's how you get the consistency over the weeks and months. The next week, I'm just doing 6 kilometer, 6 kilometer, 6 kilometers. So 18 kilometers, finishing with marathon pace, middle section, marathon pace plus 10%, first section, marathon pace plus 20%. Week 3, very simply, 7, 7, 7. Finishing with marathon pace plus 10%, marathon pace plus 20%. It's 21 kilometers. Then it's the run, the progression run that I just talked about in a previous video. So 8 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 8 kilometers, finishing with that marathon pace. Then it's 27 kilometers, so 9 kilometers to begin with, marathon pace plus 20%, 9 kilometers in the middle, marathon pace plus 10%, and the final 9 kilometers at marathon pace. And then the final run for this block is 30 kilometers. Finishing with marathon pace for 10 kilometers, so a big chunk at exactly marathon pace. Middle section, marathon pace plus 10%. First section, marathon pace plus 20%. Nothing changes. So I'm warming up and I'm ready for that initial block. It's not a shock to my body, it's not a shock to my heart, my system. I'm just ready for it and it's in control. And where you will see the heart rate drifting up, we don't want it to be unsustainable and out of control. If we do that, we're not going to be able to execute the session, but more importantly than that, we're not going to be able to execute the progressions. So it's very important to get that right. Remember, we want all of these sessions, especially the key sessions, the interval sessions and the long run, all to be within ourselves, under our control. Now I already know at 24 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 8 kilometers and 8 kilometers, if I can finish at marathon pace, I know I'm on fatigue legs once I freshen up with that taper, I know I can run the whole distance at marathon pace. A lot of the time I would just go to 30 kilometers, all specific to marathon pace, because I was training for longer distances, 80 to 100 kilometers. But it's a really fun session to do too. So if you know you're going into that, and it's all relative to marathon pace, so you're checking lots of boxes there in terms of race pace specific, energy systems, we're using exactly the same nutrition, and it's building a lot of confidence because we're moving over the ground at marathon pace. So within a short space of time, we've gone from 15 kilometers with 5 kilometers specifically at marathon pace, but all relative to marathon pace, to 30 kilometers with 10 kilometers at marathon pace, but the entire 30 kilometers is all relative to marathon pace. And I would use that run for a half marathon, for a marathon, and even for 100K. Now, a lot of marathon runners will want to go further to prove to themselves that they can run further, be out there for longer, so that they're ready to execute on race morning. And what that might look like is they'll do a 33 to 35 kilometer long run, and typically, for a lot of them, that looks like 20 to 25 kilometers, nice and easy in zone 2, and then the last 12 or 10 kilometers at marathon pace. And that quick switch up in gears to go from zone 2 easy to all of a sudden marathon pace, and so they're setting themselves up to fail. And it's not just failing in the run, it's also denting the confidence. So we arrive to start line and we're thinking, I've not even been able to execute 12 kilometers, or I was really struggling within a very easy run. But they've checked that box of being out there for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, and that's the time that they're going to be out there on race morning. You've got to have more confidence in the process. And so think about that type of run versus just 24 kilometers, progression run, 20% slower than marathon pace, 10% slower than marathon pace, marathon pace. How much more valuable and relevant is that to your marathon day than 23 kilometers easy, and then all of a sudden 12 kilometers at marathon pace? Now, as I said before, we can make these progression runs as hard or as easy as we want them. So let's say, okay, you've got in your head, October, I'm going to run my first sub-3 marathon. And 5 to 8 weeks out from that, I want to be able to run a really decent chunk of kilometers or miles at my marathon pace to show myself that I'm ready to run the whole marathon at 4:15 per kilometer or 6:52 per mile. So where you might start now is with that 15 kilometer or 18 kilometer long run, and we're doing that last 5 or 6 kilometers at marathon pace. So a small chunk at marathon pace, but we're gradually over the weeks and months going to progress that upwards. And then we're running the middle section, 5-6 kilometers at marathon pace plus 10% or 4:40 per kilometer. And then that first 5-6 kilometers, you can run that at marathon pace plus 20%. Or if that's a shock to the system and it's then too much volume, too close to marathon pace, we can run that first section of 5-6 kilometers in zone 2. So nice and conversational. And it doesn't matter whether that's 5:15 or 5:30 or 6 minutes per kilometer. It's all about effort. But what I would make sure is when you're transitioning from that first 5 kilometers to the second 5 kilometers, you let your body prepare for those faster kilometers in the 4th and 5th by gradually increasing pace and getting the heart up to an effort level that you want to hold for that middle section. Always got to think during these runs, how can I set myself up for success to execute this session well? And as I always say, it's not one session that is going to make you a sub-3 hour marathon runner. It's consecutive, consistent runs back to back to back, Wednesdays and Sundays, whatever your rotation is, and then your improvements are really compounding for you. And here's another couple of specific marathon videos to get you on your way.